Yeah.
I just wanted to confirm I have a half an hour.
Half hour? All right.
Yeah.
Let's just get started now then.
Cool. Sounds
Yeah.
good.
Okay.
I
So, testing. Okay. So, Dr. Kelly Brogan, thank you so much for being on the show. I've had probably 25 to 30 comments in the past year to get you on my YouTube channel. So I listened and I did it. And thank you for coming on.
Here we are. Pleasure to be here.
So can you tell everybody a little bit about how you got started on this journey and what you're about?
Sure. I'll offer the Cliff's Notes, which are that I am a totally conventionally trained, like bowing at the altar of pill-based symptom management psychiatrist. I specialized in prescribing to pregnant and breastfeeding women. That's how much I believed in that model until, which is a very common story in the realm of holistic and integrative medicine, I encountered through my own health journey the inbuilt limitations of the conventional model for those who are interested in potentially graduating beyond prescriptions in their life. So when I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, I kind of, felt like it's fine for my patients, but I don't want to take a prescription for the rest of my life. So where's the escape hatch? And that began what is an ongoing journey, falling down the rabbit hole, where I began to question all of the things that I had held as sacrosanct. All of the medications I assumed were a human necessity and even a gift to humanity, from birth control to antibiotics and everything in between. And I began an unwitting spiritual journey as a belligerent atheist and former real, now that I know the word, scientism practitioner, where I really just believed in the religion of science. I have been on a 10-year journey now of understanding what it is to become an adult in my own consciousness, to develop intimacy with my own emotions, and to learn how to question a lot of the conditioned programs of my childhood that were really pulling the strings behind the curtain, Mm-hmm. And this has served me greatly in my work with patients and individuals who are moving through the very tender process of transitioning from a medication-based orientation towards themselves to a med-free life. And that's my specialty at this stage is in deprescribing. So in helping individuals to transition off of specifically psychiatric meds, but it always ends up being all of the meds. It's like that spider's web I know you're very familiar with, where you never just pull one thread. It's the whole thing moves wherever you interact with it.
Yeah, beautiful. What do you think is really going on in the world? If we could just summarize, like, what's going down in the world? I asked Dr. Klinghardt this question. Do you know who Dr. Klinghardt is?
Yes, of course.
And I was with him in Seattle a few months ago. And ever since I asked him the question, I was like, I need to ask every practitioner the same question. In my eyes, the highest level of explaining it is like light versus dark, right? But everything in between, or if you have a higher explanation of what's going down, I would love to hear your lens on what is going down in the world. Why do we have so many sick people? Why is this cancer a multi-billion-dollar industry? What's going down in the world?
Mm-mm. So my first and final answer is I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. Neither do I. Yeah.
Right. Like I really don't know.
Yeah.
And part of that being my first answer is my sense that embracing mystery and embracing uncertainty is one of the great call to actions of the modern era, because our relationship to knowledge, our relationship to science, our relationship to adversarial perspectives, where one has to assert primacy, one is dominant, one controls the other, one is right and one is wrong, is a big part of the pathology that we are now treating, right, in terms of our collective consciousness. My sense, if I had to offer one, is that we are being asked to graduate into adult consciousness from a childlike consciousness. And what I mean by that is that we are growing that part of ourselves that can always see that there are multiple truths. There are as many truths as there are people. There are as many realities co-locating, right, as there are individuals living. And that is a very nuanced perspective, and it's one that fundamentally doesn't allow for there to be conflict in the way that we've experienced conflict up until this point. And we cannot get to that place until and if we learn how to become whole unto ourselves. And what I mean by that is that we have to learn how to be okay within without needing a single thing to change outside. Right. So that is self-mastery. That is self-reclamation. That is self-ownership. And I often use this analogy that, it's almost like we're recognizing that we're each individual cells, right? Like biological cells. Mm-hmm. And a cell has a cell wall. It has boundaries and an understanding of where it begins and ends. It needs that. Right? We cannot be this permeable mass of cytoplasm. It doesn't work that way.
Enlightenment.
Right?
That would be enlightenment, right?
Right, perhaps. But it also wouldn't sustain the organism, right? So there's this paradox, and there's so much paradox when you get to this point of really trying to hold all of these different tensions. One of the paradoxes embedded herein is that, the cell is separate, but it is also in communion, right? So like when you meet someone and you really vibe with them and you just feel like they get me, I get them. And it's like you start in the alphabet at the letter N or something, right? Mm-hmm. To me, that's almost like you're finding your liver cell, right? You're both like liver cells, right? Mm-hmm. And that doesn't mean that the eyeball cell is wrong. Doesn't mean that they need to be dominated by the liver cell, because that's the cancer model, right? That's what we're being almost symbolically shown, is anytime we insist that only certain elements be foregrounded, only certain kinds of cells, so to speak, be permitted, we slay the organism, right? So how can we collect in communities? There's a zeitgeist, obviously, of community right now, healing through community, incubating our belief systems in community. How can we collect in communities, find our organs, and then also allow for there to be this panoply of others that are actually essential for the functioning of the organism as a whole? And this is just a totally different way of thinking than we've ever been taught, than we grew up with, because we grew up with Newtonian mechanics, and we grew up with a very different kind of cause and effect. A to B is arrived at through force, and we're being invited to really move through the discomfort of shedding all of that dogma to embrace something that's honestly far more liberating and exciting.
Wow, beautiful. There was a song that you reminded me of. I forget the name of the song, but I think his name is Jai Jagdish or Jai Uttal or something. And he's singing this Kundalini yoga song, and he's talking about how the cells of the caterpillar turning into a butterfly. Have you ever heard this?
Imaginal cells. I've heard it, but they are imaginal cells, which I always thought is such a beautiful phrase, right? It just says everything in there.
Yeah. So in a sense, people, like us and all our followers and people who are doing this work, who are awakening, who are becoming adults, are maybe those imaginal cells, and we're all coming online, coming together. And I wonder what the other cells just want to stay as a caterpillar, right? That's what they want to do, but they're not wrong. But I want to make them wrong.
They're not wrong, because otherwise it would be the cancer model where all of the cells need to be exactly the same. It doesn't work that way, right? So even as we awaken, right? So I've been like 10 different people in the past 10 years.
Me too.
So just look at my hair. I mean, it's like literally like it's like, I remember I was talking to Joe Rogan in an interview, and he was like, so if you met yourself at a bar, but like you were 10 years ago, like, would you even talk to her? And
no.
At that point, I'd be like, hell no, Not only that, but I'd like give her a stink eye, right? Yeah. And so that's part of the challenge, is like, how do I look back on who I've been, including like the McDonald's eating, like black hair dye, birth control taking atheist? How do I, pill prescribing, how do I look at her and actually love her? And more than that, feel compassion for the fact that she was doing exactly what she needed to do at that moment. Because if I can't do that for myself, and I judge my former iterations, I'm going to live in a sea of judgment where I see and project my former self on all of these individuals who are not yet awakened, and I judge them for that. And then I am not owning all of me, because I'm projecting parts of me onto those people and judging them and disliking them and even hating them for who it is that they are. So it's everyone's playing a role. You know, Alan Watts talks a lot about how it's like theater, right? Like, so you got cast as, you know, the enlightened MMA artist, right? And you know, I got cast as this person, and she got cast as you know, the woman who works at 7-Eleven and just kind of does what she does all day. All of the parts are essential. And that's why this meta-organism analogy, I think, kind of works, because you don't see one as being, you know, evaluated as lesser than the other, because without that contrast, we cannot experience ourselves. We can only experience through difference, through contrast. And some, you know, esoteric spiritual perspectives say that we came from the unified field. We came from oneness. We came from divine love. We chose to incarnate so that we could experience grief and rage and anger and separation, and come into maybe even momentary contact with that same unified field of divine love. But the contrast is everything. And that's why, you know, even in the past few weeks, I went through like yet another dark turn of my spiral process, and
Me
came into
too.
contact.
There was a lot of astrological
Oh
things going
man.
down.
Yeah,
There's a
seriously.
lot of relationship stuff that
Yep.
flared up for me, like
Me
huge
too.
relationship stuff
Me
and
too. Yeah.
chaos and all kinds of crazy stuff. And I normally don't let those things dictate or rest on that and be like, oh, it's okay, the stars are aligning for me to be in pain. But this time I was surrendered, and I was like, this is next level clothes dryer. Like, something's going down.
Yeah, I call it a spiritual meat grinder. Exactly. Yeah, and I was in that, you know, and projecting on my partner all of this rage, like, whoa, levels of rage that I haven't been in contact with really outside of my activism, interestingly, you know, and what I've projected onto like the pharmaceutical industry, for example. And because I've been doing this work for a bit, I can, even in those moments where I feel so bad for myself, you know, where I feel so righteous, and so intolerant, like I can't even be in my own skin. Even in those moments, there's just a couple neurons online that say, you know what, this is being alive. And you're going to even miss this feeling when things get stable again. When things get you get kind of to a place where you're just going through life again. You're going to miss the vivid emotional terrain that life has now offered you the opportunity to experience, because I do believe that rage is mine. It's been in me for decades. And thank goddess that I have a partner who can bring that out of me, because there's no one else on the planet really outside of, the medical system that can bring that out of me as an individual. So I believe I chose him in part because he had that capacity, you know, and so can I own that rage as my own, and really relish it as an opportunity to just feel. I believe we came here to feel feelings, and we've misunderstood them as being some sort of a weakness or a liability or distraction. And certainly it's an experience of your own humanity that can end you up locked up in a unit in Bellevue in New York City, forcibly medicated against your will. So to feel is not, a unicorns and rainbow kind of a thing.
I always say that, unicorns and rainbows. I always say that. What the heck? Whenever I describe like New Age, I always say unicorns and rainbows.
It's the skeptic. The skeptic in me calls it that, right? The hallmark cards.
Yeah.
It's an audacious thing. It's a courageous thing to become strong enough to feel our feelings, especially in an age where, celebrities and Oprah and all the rest are, accepting money from pharmaceutical companies to tell us that it's actually brave to not do so, right? It's actually brave to just own your sickness and take your prescribed pills for it. And trust me, I get it. I used to think that. I 100% get why that would make sense. But that's why I've come to a place where perhaps the only thing I can offer is some support with informed consent, some support around making these big decisions about how to orient around your feelings and to even understand what's being asked of us. Like you said, like what's going on here? Because otherwise we might make decisions that can derail our life, induce tremendous amounts of suffering, and we wouldn't make the same decision if we had the full breadth of information. We might make the same decision. That's fine. But the pain that I still feel, the ache that I still encounter is like, what about those people who just don't know, that it's not as simple as taking the edge off with Prozac? who don't know, all of the things that I've learned through the people I've worked with around, the tremendous challenges they've had to navigate, having chosen medication at some point. That's the challenge, because you're not going to get that information from your psychiatrist. I was that psychiatrist. I didn't have that information. It's just not the nature of the system. Right. So, and you could say we're in the age of democratization of the internet, and everybody has the information if they want it. And maybe that's true too. I don't know.
Or, the way I kind of reconcile that, because that pains me as well, is, when I didn't know, there really wasn't pain. Like, there wasn't conscious pain. I was living in such a foreign place, like a different planet, that I wasn't consciously experiencing pain. That modality was what was right. Like, that was what made sense. So I wonder if without pain, if it's possible for awakening, for enlightenment. Like, I always wonder, without my pain, would I be even close to where I am at now in my career, in my solidity inside, and my ability to be present with somebody? And I think that pain is the thing that awakens someone outside of that box, right? And without that pain, if they're not in that pain, there's almost we could almost be jealous of them, right? Because we have the pain.
I've had that feeling. Absolutely. I said that to my friend the other day. I was like, wow, it's so much easier when I was asleep.
Yeah.
And it is the hallmark of initiation. Yeah. To move into the bounds of your fear that you would not otherwise imagine yourself to be capable of tolerating. That is a signature, sort of almost definition of initiation. You think of indigenous practices around initiation. You think of childbirth, natural childbirth for a woman, or even war, for many who choose to, support the country in that way. There is this experience that you have of looking at your fear, right in the eyes, and you recognize that you're actually as big, if not bigger. And without that, you're always shrinking into the familiar. You're always in the realm of comfort. And fundamentally, my opinion is you're living someone else's life. Right? You're living your parents' life. You're living under the very low ceiling of your programs, and you can anesthetize yourself. You can numb yourself. And you know what? It works. That's why, I'm not a huge believer in pathologizing addiction, because I believe that it actually works for people when they're doing it, when they're making that choice. And then there comes a moment where it doesn't. Right. And most of the time people, either opt for, they die or they change. And so I think that's kind of how it is for all of us. Like, it works to remain numb, passive, apathetic until it doesn't. And when it doesn't, that's when the invitation comes, and you either can respond to it. It's really an invitation from your soul, obviously. You can respond to it, or you can say no, but the soul keeps knocking. It's just going to keep knocking over and over and over again. And I agree that it's, like any birth canal or any initiation practice, there is that tight squeeze, there's that space, there's that ring of fire where you think you're going to, where you think you're going to die, like I'm a big home birth advocate and natural birth advocate. And I would wager that any woman who's delivered a baby naturally knows that the moment they give up, and they say, I literally cannot do this, please kill me, is the moment before the baby's head emerges. So it's that, it's the dawn, the darkest before the dawn. It's this archetypal universal phenomenon where at the brink of what we think we can handle, we are shown you're handling it. And then we are rewarded existentially, right? Because we feel strengthened, enlivened in a way that we would never come into contact with if we just kind of gently eased our way, down the path.
I have so many personal experiences of that moment that you just totally surrender. You totally just like, I'm done. And surrender in a beautiful way that it all changes from that moment, right? I haven't experienced childbirth. I know my lady has, and she told me about that precipice where the pain and the bliss are so close to each other. They're so close to each other, right?
Right.
And recently, my lady and I were going through the most difficult time we've gone through in a year and a half, and I'll blame it on the astrology. It's not my ego. It was definitely not my ego and not my projections. It was the Saturn in conjunct with Mars.
Yes.
And so we were truly at what could have been the end, truly. And the crazy thing is that I had a call booked, like a YouTube call like this, with Justin Pierce, who's a prodigy of David Data. You know who David Data is? Okay.
Huge fan.
Huge fan myself as well. And this dude, Justin, is just badass, okay,
Cool.
when it comes to like masculinity, relationships. And I didn't know much about him, but I knew I wanted to talk to him. I had a 12 o'clock call booked. At 10 a.m., my girlfriend and I were at the worst space we'd ever been in a year and a half. And I canceled on him. I was like, dude, I'm like in shambles right now. I can't take this call. And he pressed into me and he said, no, this is the time to take the call. And I said, fine, I'll take the call, but I cannot guarantee that we're posting this to YouTube because it's like going to be a coaching session. And we had the call and he opened up every single question and answered every single question I had around our relationship. And it was the most beautiful, profound call pretty much I've ever had in the relationship department. And me and my lady are so clear and so good now after being the worst we've ever been. So, you know, that stuff is just, I had to surrender to him. I had to surrender to the fact that I had already booked that call. I had to surrender to all of this, like all to everything, right?
It's when you raise the white flag and it feels like hopelessness to me, like acute, like I cannot see ever getting what I want, ever, you know? And it's that feeling of like, oh, it's like a falling back. And I know that it has the same signature as suicide, right? As suicidality. And I have vast experience with suicidality in my practice. And I know, because I never medicate, I know what that looks like when you just support it and you don't make any decisions and you don't freak out.
You don't make it mean anything, right?
You let it like a wave, you know, you let it ride. And you know, I have never seen, I mean, I don't know the process you just went through. I've never seen the dark, tight squeeze place last more than 3 weeks. Never in a decade. And I have seen like dozens and dozens and dozens of, you know, in my case, specifically women go through this space where they literally, their men are calling me hysterical. Oh my God, she threatened again. She's going to kill herself. We should take her to the hospital. And I am unflinching because I know that it transforms. But if you cannot allow yourself to just like you took that call, there was an opening you had to create, right? That's like I don't know if you know the Hanuman, like the deity. It's like you got to rip that chest open because it wants to stay closed. So there's such a courage in that. And there is a reward because you're growing stronger than you thought you were. But it seems to require. I have one girlfriend who's like totally enlightened and she never has any problems and she didn't have a childhood trauma. I mean, it's like, I guess there are people like that who are farther on the path, so to speak. But for the rest of us plebes, like, yeah, there are those growth pains for sure.
Well, you said about, and you got to go in 5 minutes. Is that correct?
Yeah. Like
okay.
10.
10. Okay. There's the Hanuman thing. I never heard of that, but this teacher, Samuel Sagan from the Clair Vision School. I've studied in the Clair Vision School for the past 3 years. It's like an amazing school around awakening and awakening the third eye. And Samuel Sagan was an MD who started the school and he's since passed, but he talked about what a real warrior is. A warrior is not someone who closes, like conventional machismo men. They think being a warrior is like, fuck you, you know, like I'm
boundaries,
you, you know, like closed. And then Samuel used to say a warrior is someone who like acknowledges. So there's 3 different things, right? There's the fuck you and there's the closed. There's the like the world is fucked up. Let's close to it. Let's be safe. Let's like store our rice. Fuck all that. And then there's the world is totally screwed. All this stuff is going on. Okay, what's on the agenda this morning? You know what I mean? Like open, just like that description that you had, like open it anyway, right? No matter how screwed things are. And no matter
100%. The only way I think you can get there though, is by resolving your fear of yourself, right? Because otherwise it's going to feel like warfare. And why would you put down your gun if you're at the front of the battlefield? Like that's stupid, right? That's not enlightened, right? So the way that you get to that place is so much inner work, ferreting out all those points of shame, coming into contact with all that rage, feeling all that grief and mourning. You know, like when I went through this rupture recently with my partner, sounds like you were in a similar space. I felt mourning. I don't even know what I was mourning. Like somebody died.
Yes,
you
me
know?
too. Me too.
Yeah. And it it had to do with him, but probably mostly not. Right. So like you get all that moving, and then you can show up with your heart open, like no matter what. And that's why I love the etymology of the word courage, right? It stems from the French, as far as I understand, cœur, right? Which means like heart. It's a heart. It's a strong heart. It's not big biceps. It's not a large weapon, right? It's not storming the castle. It's that strong heart.
Yes. Yes. I have to use the restroom really quick.
Yes, go.
Pause for 40. Okay, bathroom break. Sorry about that, guys. So, okay, we got 5 or 10 minutes, 7 minutes left. So is there anything else that's coming in the space for you that you want to talk about? Sorry to break up our flow like that.
Yeah, no worries. No, I mean, I think that for me, the work that I'm doing principally is to ferret out my victim stories, right? So all of the ways every single day that I find myself blaming somebody else for how I feel, or needing to be right about it, or feeling like, well, this is objective. They did that. And, obviously I feel this, to understand that it's an opportunity for me to loosen that grip and to feel whatever is at the root of that indignation. And this is a daily practice. It's, practicing what I preach. So I wrote a whole book about it recently. And I know that this is the work many of us are doing, but there's a real culture of kind of blaming for shaming that's going on now. And it's this very potentially childlike orientation towards the power that others have over our experience, right? So can someone really make you feel shame? Can someone really make you mad? Can they really make you feel anything that you don't already feel, that isn't already yours? And that's a controversial perspective, but it feels like the most empowering one, because otherwise I'm walking on the eggshells of my life, waiting for somebody to offend me, not agree with me, hurt me. And I have, I'm Italian and Irish, so I'm enculturated, by my family of origin, to really think tribally, like, are you on my team or are you not? And I've gone through my life that way. And I've amassed a pretty big army, right? So obviously I'm good at the warfare thing. I know that there's no rest in there. There's no peace. There's no end to that. So, how can I get to a place where I own all of the things that I feel? And, I can vent in my journal or potentially to a friend, but ultimately I know, I'm like winking to myself from on high, I know that I've just been given the opportunity. I've potentially even created the circumstance in my own life to feel the old ancient stuff that has been in there for decades, wanting to simply, finally be felt, right? And I give the permission. As the adult consciousness, I give myself permission to feel it. And I say, it's okay, you can cry now, right? And the story is just kind of like a vehicle. It's like the train, my emotions take out of town. That's it.
You just lit me up inside when you said all that, because I've been doing a lot of work with like Landmark Forum. Have you ever heard of Landmark Forum?
Sure.
And
yeah.
I'm working with a coach one-on-one right now who I'm just having a hunch that you and her would just hit it off. You should totally work with her. She was a forum leader for like 30 years, and now she works on deconstructing the ego. And her name's Sophie McLean. She's in. Are you in New York, by the way?
No, Miami now.
Miami. Oh,
yeah.
She's in New York. And she's just unbelievable. And the thing that I learned, one of many, is that no one can put guilt on us, right? We choose to put the t-shirt of guilt on, no matter what someone is doing to us. And I learned that, my family has guilted me my entire life. Like that's how they kept me small, was to like guilt me. And I took this thing on of like, I will not act out of guilt. And I would like fight against them, And then I realized not acting out of guilt has nothing to do with if they're guilting me or not. It's if I choose to put that t-shirt on and move in that direction from that emotion, right? And so anyway, there's so much that I'm going through right now that we don't have time to dive into, that has to do with like, can anyone really make you feel something, right?
As children, yes. I would argue, the first, number of years of our life, we're in a brain state where we are so programmable, so easily conditioned. And, we have invariably experiences where we feel an emotion and we are, led to experience that as dangerous, right? So the suppression, the curation of our persona in order to please and gain love begins early on. However, as we get into our 30s or 40s or 50s, there comes a point at which you begin to, develop awareness that you're wearing a mask that does not feel like the whole of you. And keeping it on is harder. It's like it slips, right? Keeping it on is harder and harder and harder. And you can crazy glue it and masking tape it, and you can do that. That's what some people choose to do. And it's what I certainly chose to do for many years of my adult life. And you can also make the decision at a certain point with the proper support to let it fall, right? And then you recognize, wow, my parents aren't in the room, thought they were, right? Or my brother isn't even here. And here I am in my adult terrain. And when you see with fresh eyes, like the world that you've created, and you finally get to say, oh, actually, I don't want that. And that's not compatible with who I am without that mask, right? And so that process is really the adultification process. And that is what I call self-ownership, right? And self-reclamation on an emotional level is exactly what you said, that you are the one putting the guilt t-shirt on. And many people think that's like blaming the victim. It's just that the alternative is you live in a world where people have power over you. Yes. And I prefer to live in a world where I'm sovereign. And that comes with some very uncomfortable responsibilities and moments where I am brought right back to my childhood because I feel, the voice of my, child self is like, it's not fair, right? Right. I'm brought right back there as if I'm like 6 years old again. And you learn, it's a practice, right? You learn to self-soothe. You learn to have your adult consciousness remain online no matter what. And ultimately you get to a place where you kind of just can laugh at it all. It can't get you, right? It can't push you off your center. And that kind of equanimity is the precondition for love, for true love.
That lasts, that you could hold in
exactly. Right. Because so many people are like, oh, my problem is that I'm so compassionate and considerate to others and I ignore myself. And, I always think, it may look like that to you, but you're only as compassionate to others as you are to yourself. Wait till they violate you. Then you're not compassionate towards. That's not true compassion, right? So if equanimity is the precondition for true unconditional love that just moves through you like a cup overflowing and is not transactional, like, did you do this for me? Because then I'll do it for you. I mean, that's the only way I've known how to love, right? And I'm beginning slowly to graduate beyond that. And it involves a tremendous amount of dedication to my inner work. And I don't see anything better to do with my life. I'm waking up to do that every day. I'm signed up, and I know many of us are signing up. And that's why I think it's really a beautiful time to be alive.
Wow. Potent, so beautiful. You strike me as someone who, in the work with Sophie, I explored my 2-year-old self and what he decided life was. And I made life, the description of life that I put on at 2 years old was that life is the streets. Life is the streets, and I'll be so good they can't ignore me. I feel like you have a similar blueprint there. Does that resonate?
I do, yeah. I call it the mercenary program. It's like I got this, like, step aside because I got like shit to slay, it's that, it's a very effective, right? Defensive structure. And unlike so many of the patients I've worked with who relate to their own rich emotional terrain and their own vulnerabilities and sensitivities with self-resistance, like they fight their own emotions, right? I didn't even know I had any. I never felt things like shame or guilt or fear, literally until probably like 3 years ago. Literally, like without exaggeration, never felt nervous. I was like an android, I was like a true picture of a very effective defensive system. right? Because it kept me from ever being in direct experience of my own uncomfortable feelings, right? That didn't mean I couldn't be excited or, whatever. But that is a very effective system that has so much shadow to it that's what I unpack every single day. But many of the, those who get diagnosed as mentally ill, their defensive structure is to self-flagellate, self-judge, self-resist, and internalize all of the messages of society that say, if you go where your feelings want to take you, then you're broken, you're sick, you're worthless, right? And they collude with that, and they generate an inner war. For me, it is a very different experience, but it is that kind of like battle cry type of energy, like nothing's gonna stop me. And again, our defenses work until they don't, until they generate the experience of separation from ourselves, separation from others, and this uncomfortable awareness, like that there's got to be more to the life experience than what I've come into contact with. And again, you can easily see how people choose medication at that point. It makes tremendous sense because the agony, the terror, the fear, the incompatibility with basic functioning and punching the clock 9 to 5 is so real, that unless you have someone to say, to turn it on its head and say, you may think that you're broken and sick and like serious things are wrong with your brain, but what if actually you are exquisitely sensitive in all the right ways? And if you just learn how to use that power, you can't imagine what's going to
become a healer. You become a world-renowned healer. The same person that's in the hospital can become a world-renowned healer.
I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen many, many times. In fact, almost without exception, they're, artists and visionaries and healers and creatives. And it's, I don't identify as any of those things, but the people that I've worked with, the women who I've helped to transition into this mindset, midwife, this transformation with, I've been just blown away with how powerful these women are.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, there's so much more to discuss, but I know you got a busy schedule. That was like total perfect punch for the people listening. I felt like it was nice and potent and short. So thank you. How do people find you?
Yeah, so I'm running my mouth over at kellybroganmd.com and on Instagram and all the rest at the same handle.
Amazing.
Awesome.
Cool. Thank you guys. Hope you enjoyed the show. Peace.